Good morning. It's good to be here. I'm Rich Brim with Sakuma Brothers, and I'd like to give a shout out to our friends in Prosser. Before I go into this, I want to give kind of a disclaimer. We have a conventional fresh line, and I'm not advocating for any particular brand or manufacturer of equipment. I will say that in any operation, service is probably one of the most important things, and to make sure that your service, the source of your service comes from probably from the side of the border where your manufacturing facility is. So this is an overview of a fresh pack operation, and particularly for our friends in Prosser, I want to start out with some fundamentals. And let's see here. This is not a blueberry. All right. Any questions? These are blueberries. Now, when you watch this hand pick operation, it can bring up the question, hand pick versus machine pick. We're not going to get into that conversation. We typically are a hand pick operation for fresh, but we do also some machine pick for fresh. So the demand for blueberries is strong, and that's a real good thing. If anybody heard what Alan Schreiber said this morning, there's a lot of blueberries coming at us. The good news is, you know, they're a super fruit. They taste good. They're easy to handle, and it turns out they're good for you to boot. So the fresh versus frozen conversation. We know last year, and the numbers that we saw earlier today showed this, a lot of growers moved their blueberries into the fresh market because of a concern over the pricing on the frozen side. And so much fruit, well, it was a combination probably of the harvest coming in a little short, plus all the fruit that went from IQF into fresh. It actually breathed a little bit of life back into the IQF market, and it did depress, particularly during the Duke peak, depress the fresh market. Got to go the right way here. Grower concerns. You know, in addition to yield and pesticides and MRLs and all of those other issues, the grower now needs to comply with FSMA produce safety rule, and you're going to need to be certified either Global GAP, USDA GAP, Primus GAP, Primus GFSI, one of the certification bodies. And the other thing, as a grower, what are you going to plant? And everybody who I talk to, I say, what do you have in the ground? And what's the first word they say? Dukes. The second word is and. So it's Dukes and some other variety, which we'll see what happens a little bit later with that. On the packer, some of the packer concerns, of course, is access to markets and matching your capacity and quality to the market that you're going to go into. Some markets have variety preferences, some have higher quality standards. And then what are you going to plan for capacity? How many pounds to plan for? And you look at the profile of volume, and there's 2 to 3 weeks where you have a lot of Dukes and then the other varieties. So this is kind of an actual graph of what we did last year. And the numbers on the bottom are the week, is the production week. So you're going to see for us, between week 27 and week 31 was the Duke peak. So we plan to deal with that capacity. And during the Duke peak, actually at that peak, we are at full capacity. Now, the message here is, and I predict that this is similar to many other people who have fresh lines, you're going to have your Duke peak, and then on the shoulder, you've got capacity, excess capacity. So down toward the end, down in here, you can see you're going to have the processors are all looking for that off Duke peak berry. So there is competition for that off variety, or that later variety. But again, depending on the market you're in, you're going to have to, it has to meet those quality standards. So what you'd like to have is something with a Duke quality that has that firmness and the texture that can meet the fresh market. Something like that that's going to be on the back end. And then of course there's flavor issues. One of my favorite, of course, is a Liberty. And we freshed quite a few Liberties this year, organic and conventional. I've kind of lost track of where I am at with my notes. I might have missed something that was really important. But I think this leads us into our process flow chart. Now this is, there's a lot of different ways you could lay this out, but this is broken down into 4 segments: receiving, line operation, packing, and then the finished pack. So on the receiving side, that's where we pull our samples for grading and for SWD test. And we do test every load for SWD. Stage it in the cooler, and then it's pulled from the cooler and stage it for packing or to go down the process line. And then for line operation, it's pretty straightforward. You dump your trays, you go through the blower, your soft color sorter combo, and then we have a hand sort line. Then for the packing side, I've kind of broke out the filler. So you have an incline belt to the filler, you go into your clam filler, the pack out table, and then the finished grading. After that, for the finished pack, then that goes back into the cooler. We pre-cool it before we ship it, and then down the road it goes. So on the receiving side, the receiving and grading, the important thing here is we have to have traceability one step up and one step behind. In other words, we need to know where the fruit came from, which field it came from, and then also where it went. So the traceability for us starts at the scale house, where we generate a barcode, and that barcode system tracks our product throughout the process up to and including when it is shipped. Grade samples are pulled at the scale house, and grading is done according to USDA standards, and samples are tested for SWD, as I'd already mentioned. This is an example of a bar-coded pallet tag. For our organic fruit, we have a different color paper that the barcode tag is printed and attached to this paper. But for ease of, so you can walk into the cooler and say, okay, this is organic. We have a different color for organic. But on this, you can see you have the scale ticket number, the grower, the date, the commodity, the variety, the field, and the destination. In other words, where did it go? And for us, the destination is going to be typically fresh or IQF. Now this is dumping trays on an incline belt, and you can see a couple of berries moving backwards. We'll see if we can replay this. And you want that, I guess it's not going to play again. But you want that, you want your incline belt to be at least a little less than the angle of repose, so that your berries aren't continually rolling backwards. And I mean, obviously I'm preaching to the choir for anybody who's actually got a fresh line, but you've got to elevate your berries to start them through the process so you can get through all of the drops. So you can elevate them again to get them onto your filler. So this is a blower, which is the next step, and you can see this is a fairly aggressive blowing. This is probably early season Dukes, but you want your blower to be set just enough so you can get out your HEM and your miscellaneous debris. And of course you don't want it to blow so hard that it blows over the trash dam, unless you've got some mummyberry, which this actually works pretty good. And this year we had a dab of that in some of our organic Liberties, and this really cleaned up the mummyberry just right here at the blower. Just blew them over the trash dam and onto the waste belt. Now the soft sorter pads, this isn't playing real well, and the reason is when I did this, I used my iPhone that had a slow-mo function, and it turns out it doesn't play well on anything else that's not an Apple product. But the manufacturer service tech is going to tell you you're going to target the second third of the pad. So you want to adjust your belt speed so that it cascades off that belt and drops on about the second third of that pad. and the pad then determines whether it's soft or not. I tend to disagree with the soft sorter. I always go back there and I test it, and I feel what's coming off of there, and I say, wait a minute, there's a lot of good stuff in here, and some of the good stuff that gets in the waste stream is because the calyx may land on that pad. The pad sees it as a soft berry, then the air ejector up here tags it and blows it into the waste stream. The other thing is, when I have disagreed with the soft sorter, I say, wait a minute, this soft sorter is set too sensitive. Let's change the settings. The line supervisor changes the settings because he's a nice person, and then we go out a grade on the back end for soft. So the machine typically does what it's supposed to do. Now the color sorter, same deal. I was doing a slow-mo because I wanted to see, whether, how it was kicking the stuff out. And here you can see you cascade off the belt, you drop down, and then the ejectors, the air ejectors, and kick out the fruit that don't meet the standard that you set for. Now this piece of equipment is pretty easy to use. It's very effective in letting you dial in the hue and the amount of color that you want. As a matter of fact, if you've got a really nice, a bunch of clean fruit coming down the line, and you've got a very good group of sorters, they want to be doing something, right? So sometimes you might leave a little bit of color in just to give the sorter something to do. But, and I can't get this isn't going to let me look at an issue I thought I could show you, because at the end, and I'll play it again if it will, but you can see this, in this situation, the cameras are set at angles, one above and one below. So it's looking at both sides of the berry. And that's why this does such a good job of reading the berry and selecting the color that you want. Now, a lot of you guys that have ever had a fresh line, the old best sorters where you just had your ribbons and the air ejector just blew the berry up over the dam instead of having the drop. They were probably a little easier on the blueberry because this drop, you drop from your belt down through the area where it's red, then you land down here on you want to land on the kind of the vertical part of that tangential runout, which is like the bottom of the basic Grand Coulee Dam where the water comes down and it hits that runout concrete at the bottom. So you want the berry to hit that vertical section of that runout. The other downside of that drop, even if you hit it just right and don't damage your berry, one of the things that can happen when you roll is on the fresh side, you want that bloom to stay on the berry. So anything that you do on that line that's going to impact the bloom is probably a negative. So these are just some random pictures of our sorting line, and a couple of things to note. The first thing is there's a lot of white belt showing here. Now I'm an operations guy. I don't like to see white belt. You're looking at probably 1,000 pounds an hour on a line that could do maybe 3,000 to 4,000 pounds an hour. Now when you get up in full capacity and you're everything's clicking along and you're running at a very high rate, 4,000 pounds an hour, that's a few berries on the line. So you've got to be very careful that you're getting out all of your foreign material. But if you're running a hand-picked Duke and it's been a clean deal and you know who the grower was and your equipment's running well, you can sail right along. Another thing to note in this picture is in that top left-hand picture, you can see I got photobombed by Glenn Sakuma, who you can see right here. Whoops, guess not there, huh? Back up. But one of the things that Glenn would come into the plant just about every evening just to kind of see how things went. Even though he was mostly involved on the machine pick side, but he did some machine pick for fresh. And every time he did some machine pick for fresh, you can set your watch, and he was going to be in the plant to see how it ran that evening, which is a good thing. Now this picture is you can see the sorting line, then your inclined belt at the end that goes up to your filler. And what's significant about this is some outfits uncouple their filler from their sorting line so that they have no downtime associated with the filler. And the filler can have downtime, particularly if you have a problem with your clams or your labeler downstream. So what some houses will do is they'll pre-sort and go into, how's my time? I'm in trouble. 1 minute? Holy cow. Stand by, here we go. Okay, so this is our cross belt feeding our filler, and you can note a little bit of berries falling backwards. That is not a good sign. But the problem was we were undersized and we had to speed that up because I wasn't filling out my filler. This is a wedge wheel. This is a wedge wheel denester, and we had both the guillotine denester and the wedge wheel denester. This is the conventional guillotine, and they both ran well. I'd say the wedge wheel denester made it easier for the changeovers. And here's the payoff, and that's a fully loaded line where you've met quality, and this is where this is where everything kind of sings and dances. Clams and labels. The heavier clams are more rigid, but they're easier to adjust for when doing changeovers, labels. I'm going to go back to that. This is important. Pre-labeled clams during peak eliminate the labeler downtime. For the Duke peak, have your clams pre-labeled. Otherwise, you're in for a challenge. For shipping, we pre-chilled at 33 degrees. We ship refrigerated with temperature monitoring. Thank you for your time. Please visit Michaela Staples, who helped me with this presentation, at our booth, and feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you.